doesn't want to go. Being a pain. Here we go. Perfect. Internet, 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 internet. What a pain in my ass, man. I definitely need to call my internet provider because this is bullshit. It should just not go down like that. It's just absolutely fucking ridiculous that it does. While I'm waiting for more people to come into the chat, and if you're on TikTok, you can come in. The description is in my thinger. You click the thinger, it goes to the thing with the thing. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen the e-girls. You've gone to the e-girls. We know about it. The Drakowski, good to see you. No, communism doesn't work. People starve in corruption. I would be very surprised to find out that you know anything about communism, dude. If that's what you're saying, like, not like. I disagree. Like, I disagree. Cotton, good to see you again, bud. In a perfect example of why capitalism fails is the monopolization of the system. You've got RBC buying HSBC in Canada for $13.5 billion. So the banking system monopolizing itself, becoming smaller, right? That independent banks can no longer survive. They're being bought up by the bigger fish. It's how capitalism works, right? Drakowski, sorry, but did you answer my question earlier? It glitched out of me. Yeah, I think the things my internet went down right as I was answering that question, dude. Sorry, bud, can you restate the comment? Because I forget. Sorry, dude. What else do we got here? Yeah, Ontario food banks fear rising demand will outpace supply decades after they were deemed temporary, right? There's been an increase in food bank usage across the province. The Soviet famine. Oh, so we're just doing Nazi propaganda, not even CIA propaganda, right? We're just doing Nazi propaganda. Literally, every single academic that has gone into the Soviet archives, including virulent anti-communists, have walked out saying that the Soviet famine was unintentional and that they did everything they could to alleviate it. So that's over, as far as I'm concerned, right? Unless you want to find like a credible academic that comes out of Harvard and Oxford, like the ones that I listen to, right, that says otherwise, you can go off and find them, right? Stop listening to the CIA. Certainly stop listening to Nazis, right? And stop believing everything you see on TV. So basically, why did the communists abandon this ideology, right? Specifically the Soviets, right? So specifically the Soviets. And I think it really is, like, the heart of it is that I think that they viewed, like, communism is a project that you constantly need to be invigorating, constantly. And Stalin died, and Stalin was something of a spent force, right? Like, Stalin was the one who did the land reforms. Stalin was the one that was the leader when they defeated the Nazis. They went through the what's called the Great Purge or the Great Terror, if you like, because they were dealing with political assassinations and things like this. But I do think that Stalin was something of a spent force by the end of his life. And he wasn't reinvigorating or creating new projects. Like, that's definitely the truth. That the projects that Stalin was embarking on, he did in his youth, when he was a younger leader. And then fighting the Nazis and the reconstruction post-Nazism, or post the Nazi invasion, is serious. Like, that's something that capitalists love to pretend didn't happen. Right? They love to pretend like the Nazis didn't invade the Soviet Union and that the Soviets didn't defeat the Nazis and that there wasn't a period of reconstruction after that was required, right? You can't exactly embark on a gigantic project of building towards communism when you're literally attempting to rebuild your society after Nazis invade it. But after all that's over, he becomes kind of a politically spent force. The people who come after him were clearly politically unaligned with him. Khrushchev, the very next leader, literally his first speech was an anti-Stalinist speech where he basically lied to everybody about Stalin's legacy and spewed a bunch of bullshit. There's a great book called Khrushchev Lied that goes through that in great detail. and and so the next leadership didn't really care about communism. They weren't embarking on communist projects, and in fact, I think their concern was not so much how do we continue the project of communism, but how do we make sure that the Soviet Union and that Russia doesn't get invaded again. I think that's really where they were concerned, or where their concerns were, right? And so they pivot away from how do we ensure an egalitarian society based on Marxian principles and all that kind of stuff, and they start to say, how do we integrate ourselves with the West? How do we integrate ourselves with Europe? How do we ingratiate ourselves with Europe and the West? And they were seeing, I think that Khrushchev and Yeltsin and all these guys, Gorbachev, were seeing that if they wanted to continue with this path of communist expansion, that they were going to be isolated. And you got to remember, at this period of time, like, China is not the superpower that it was, that it is now. Even 30 years ago, China was just kind of on the rise, and that tells you how swiftly China has risen up, because it shifted dramatically very quickly. And I'll get to your question, Nega, because there are differences. There are big differences, if you ask me. And so their concern became, how do we ingratiate ourselves with the West? We don't really have any other communist allies that can really throw down with. The West is, like, America did not get touched during World War II. It didn't need to go through a period of reconstruction. So it just, like, really built up and became an economic superpower because its manufacturing was untouched. All of that was untouched. And so it was obviously the superpower on the stage. And so Russia's doing everything it can to ingratiate itself to that system. And part of that ingratiation means the abandonment of the communist project. And that ingratiation and that attempt, I think, ultimately fails, obviously, considering what's going on right now under Putin. And what's odd is that it didn't need to have failed. I think that it failed because of the West's xenophobia and inability to respect Russia as a peer. That under Putin, the Russians, you're doing Pol Pot, CIA asset Pol Pot. Okay, you don't know anything about Pol Pot. Conversation over. And so the goal, I think, for the post-Soviet, the post-Stalin Soviets, was to ingratiate itself to America, was to become more tied into the international system, in the hopes that it would protect them and that they would be there would be more stability and peace that way. And it fails, obviously, and it fails. I think the moment that I think Putin realized that it was never going to happen was in 2010 when they applied to when Russia applied to be part of NATO. NATO existing exclusively for the destruction of the Soviet Union, and NATO declined. That, I think, was the moment when Putin realized that it was never going to happen, and that the West was always going to be allied against Russia. And the invasion and destruction of Libya was really, really, I think, troublesome for Russia and for Putin. Like, Putin gave a really impassioned speech where he talked about the invasion and destruction of Libya, and when it happened, and I think he thought that it was very disturbing what happened in Libya, and it is disturbing what happened in Libya. Like, everyone should be disturbed about what happened in Libya. That you can say what you like about Gaddafi and all that kind of stuff, but the truth was that Libya had the strongest economy on the continent, and was becoming a more egalitarian nation under these sort of socialist principles. And in the space of only a few years, NATO turned it into a slave trade system where there's literally open air slave markets, and those still exist in Libya. Like, that's an absolute fucking disaster. It's an absolute fucking disaster. And it's disturbing, and I think that really resonated with Putin, and NATO declining their application, I think, really resonated historically. NATO exists to attack Russia. That's what it exists for. And if they're going to decline Russia's entrance, right, what does that say? And I think that was the moment when Putin realized he needed to pivot. He needed to pivot into the BRICS system, into China, India, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil, and create alliances with the global south, because he knew he was not going to be able to move forward with the West. And that's what this situation that's happening, and I'm being kind of vague about it because TikTok will literally shut my stream down if I start talking about it explicitly, but that's what this is all about. That's what this current situation is all about. That there needs to be a moment where a line is drawn in the sand, and this is it. This is it. Russia will never be part of the Western system, and so it needs to go somewhere else. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I love the USSR under Lenin. Yeah, I mean, think of the energy, the post-revolutionary energy, the upswell. Anything is possible. Absolutely, the USSR under Lenin, and you still have a figure like Trotsky who is involved in the project, right? That the Stalin-Trotsky rivalry had not reached a head. I think that the Stalin-Trotsky rivalry is one of the great tragedies of communism, and that sort of thing should be avoided at all costs. That we should never expel our rivals, that we should try to keep everybody ingratiated somehow into the system. And but post-revolution, like, I mean, for God's sakes, like, the Soviets are the first people into space. Like, that doesn't happen on accident, right? Like there is a spirit under the Soviet Union where anything is possible. And like, literally they get into space. Like, yeah, anything's possible under a communist idea and a communist project. So let's get to this negation. I appreciate this. This is an interesting analogy, but there are differences. In relation with the Khrushchev clique taking power after Stalin, can't you say the same thing with Deng? No. And I think that you can't say the same thing with Deng, because I think Deng was still a communist. That Khrushchev and that group of people were leaning away from communism, attempting to ingratiate themselves with the West. Deng was trying to build his own nation under Marxist principles. That they had to... Leon, I'm so glad that you're here, bud. Your comments were so like, oh my God, I have to talk to this guy. A guy from Chile? Yeah, dude, you're going to know more about the subject than me. That's very exciting for me. I'm so interested in hearing what a Chilean, having gone through the neoliberal project and then the recent kind of ouster, right? That neoliberalism was born in Chile, it will die in Chile. What an exciting phrase to come out of Chile. I'm so interested in talking to you, bud. And so while Khrushchev and them, I think, were interested in moving away from those communist systems and ingratiating themselves with the West, Deng was doing what he was doing, and that group under Deng was doing what he was doing in order to strengthen China and to continue the project of communism. That's certainly what they argued, and that's certainly what they were arguing, that they were just looking at what reality was giving them, moving forward in a way that they considered sensible, and they weren't doing it to abandon the project of communism, but doing it instead to increase the power of China in the hopes that it would move them further along the path to communism. That part of the thing that's interesting about Marxist theory is that it's mainly a critique of capital, right? Karl Marx, when he writes his works, it's a critique of capitalism, but he doesn't have much by way of solutions, right? And so the communists, the Chinese especially, but also the Soviets, are trying to find their way. And they don't actually have a roadmap. And they don't actually have goals, right? And so the reality is ultimately that Deng's existence does two things. It shows, A, the Chinese are not fundamentalists, right? They don't view communism as a fundamentalist thing that needs to be fundamentally adhered to, right? That there's flexibility there. But it also, two, shows the strength of their institutions. That the National People's Congress is actually a very resilient system that has managed to accept a certain degree of capitalism in the society without allowing it to infect and corrupt the system and thereby collapse it, like it's happening in the West. Bro, they bully you on TikTok and they tell you the other guy who lost his life, how sad, and make fun of the guy. Can you react? Yeah, I've talked about it before, Tito. Like, I understand what. At first, I was kind of disgusted by it, but I've thought about it more. I view what's happening there as a reaction to grief, that the society doesn't know what to do anymore, that our systems are not responding to the massive amounts of suicide that's happening amongst the veterans. Ronnie was a veteran, and he committed suicide like many veterans do, and nothing is being done about it. Our veterans are being abandoned en masse. There's a reason why enlistment is down. There's a reason why people are no longer going off to these endless, godless wars, right? And because there's so much inaction, people don't know how to respond anymore. And that's true of the mass shootings that have happened throughout the United States. The system's no longer responding to them. They're in fact empowering the shooters more and more. You can see that with that one kid who literally killed 2 people in the streets. What was his name? Kyle, I think, something or other. And then I think the straw that really has broken the camel's back in regards to how people are reacting to things is the Jeffrey Epstein story. How there's literally like a pedophile sex island that presidents, literally Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and then billionaires like Bill Gates, and then people you're supposed to respect and admire like Stephen Hawking went to this pedophile sex rape island, right? Like, and I think it's broken our ability. Like, we are helpless in that regard. Like, we don't have the emotional language to deal with it anymore. And so I think people are descending into a form of Dadaism. And Dadaism was an art period that happened throughout Europe post World War I, and the seminal statement was a society that produces the horrors of this kind of war should be cleansed. That it should be culturally cleansed, that the icons and the figures that exist, that we're supposed to consider sacred, should be rendered immune, and the way to do that, or rendered moot, and the way to do that is through absurdism. And so I take a look, and anytime I glance over and all this kind of like mind-blowing thing that they're saying, the emoji with like the head, the mind-blowing emoji, right, the flower, the water pistol emoji, like all that kind of stuff, like, it's collective absurdism. And I think the thing that has really elevated the Ronnie story beyond other stories is that he did it on a live stream, and then Facebook made that said that live stream is fine, that video is fine. They didn't take it down. And so now you've got like a major tech company that's basically just being like, yeah, shoot yourself on our platform. We'll watch it. We'll spread it around. Let it go viral. Right? Like, we are a degenerate, disgraceful, fallen culture and country, and it's obvious. Like, it's obvious at this point. And I just don't think people have the emotional stability or wherewithal to know how to respond to it. And so they're choosing to respond to it. Well, and choosing, but they're reacting to it and responding to it with this Dadaist absurdism. And this just kind of like, well, this is what we are now. We're just nuts. It's nonsense. And initially I thought that it was really disgusting and disgraceful, but now I just see it as sad, that it's, and literally sad, because people are dealing with grief, that we are collectively grieving the death of our society and the death of our culture, or at least the death of our idea of our culture, that we're watching the death of the myth of our culture. That the myth that we have created can no longer be sustained, and so it's collapsing, and this is how people are responding to it, and so people are grieving, and to the people who are acting that way, I'm not going to let it happen in the YouTube chat. I'm not going to stop it in the TikTok chat for sure, but I think the best thing that anybody could do, if you find yourself doing this, if you find yourself acting this way, acknowledge that you're in a state of grief and actively find grief, because our culture is not going to provide a mass catharsis. It's not going to come together and attempt to have us grieve. We're too stuck in Marvel movies and dumb shit like that. We're too up our own ass about our own greatness. And the other kind of response that we're having is if it's not our greatness in terms of how good we are, it's our greatness and how horrible we are. And so there's no sense that we have to come together and have a cultural grieving moment. And so that's not going to happen. So you've got to do it on your own. And you've got to be serious about it and try to find people who are also in that kind of place of grieving. I think that's what's driving people to me, is that we all know that we're in grief and that we're grieving the death of at least the myth of our society, if not the death of our society. And so we've got to come together and grieve. And that's what I think that we're doing here, that we're having a cultural grieving moment and attempting to find cultural catharsis with one another. And it's going to be figures like Ronnie McNutt, and it's going to be figures more and more as we go along, especially as people realize, I can commit suicide in public open spaces and people will venerate me. I'll become famous for it. So it's going to keep happening. And as it keeps happening, we've got to come together and try to find a cultural catharsis to grieve together. And so the reaction that I'm getting from the TikTok chat is natural, I think. It's just people struggling with their own grief, and they don't know how to, because we're emotionally stunted. We don't know how to deal with our own emotions as Westerners, and the only way that we do deal with our emotions is by bottling them up, and things like this eventually. So when they finally come out, well, they're going to come out through anger, but also through this sort of absurdism. In many ways, I feel like I should be expecting it, right? I've thought this for a long time about our culture is going to descend into a kind of absurdism, and here it is on my chat in real time. It's happening, and so I don't hate these people. I think that they're dealing with their emotions and they don't know how, and they keep watching and they keep commenting because they know that they're going to find the catharsis they need here, as long as they stick around. So good luck to all of us. Thanks for your question, Tito. I hope you're doing well out there, bud. Drukovsky, don't forget that Americans even have the fascist Nazis helping them out in the space race, but the Soviets still won. Yeah, exactly. Unless you count the man on the moon as the end point, right? That's what they did. They changed the goal. Like, the Soviets got into space first, and so they changed the goal to be land the man on the moon. And the Soviets were always just like, wow, okay, I guess. Like, that was never the point for them. Leon, I'm excited about this. I don't know if you saw my messages from the guy from Chile. What you're doing is awesome. Debates are nearly a thing nowadays. Well, what I'm doing is not really debate. Like, I don't really care about the debate bro stuff. I never find that to be as satisfying as people think it is. But I appreciate your comment, but I really do. Leon, I believe communism failed due to its own structural flaws and its incomprehension by those who sought to put into practice the social and economic findings of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. This system fell into the worst of discredit for not completely eliminating social distances, for distributing poverty among many instead of wealth, for having created monstrous and repressive states instead of having destroyed them, and for having generated, as in capitalism, a privileged elite with standards of living far above those of the average citizen. So this analysis is I mean, it's difficult for me to disagree with it. Like, especially, like, it sounds very Soviet in its analysis. That you're not wrong, right? Like, that Khrushchev and Yeltsin and these guys were an elite, right? That they were disinterested in continuing they were interested in power. They weren't interested in continuing the project of communism. And that, to me, the failure of the Soviet system is that it fails to create institutional strength. Like, and I'll say that again and again, right? That it fails to create an institution to successfully pass the baton from one generation to the next generation. That the baton passed successfully, although tumultuously, right? The Stalin-Trotsky divide, right? But it passed successfully from Lenin to Stalin, but it wasn't able to pass successfully from Stalin down the line. And I put the blame of that squarely on the institutions that the Soviets were unable to build. that the institutions and the structure of those institutions stop responding to the needs of the people and become insular and become focused on its own existence, right? For its own self. Whereas successful institutions need to constantly be responding to the people who are to the people, just to the people, and you are right that that is something for the communists to be aware of, that these systems can decay, and that what's important is the building of an institution that remains responsive to the people, right? And that institutions can become corrupted. And to be fair to the Soviets, right? And I think it is fair to say this, that they were really the first people to try this communist idea and try building a society on Marxist ideas. And so to think that they would be completely successful, I think, would be like, I don't think that that's realistic. Like, did the first rocket that was ever shot at space make it to space? Did the first time that we tried to get men on the moon, did that make it? No. It took several attempts and many tries. And I think that's no different for the Soviets. And I also find that when people get into criticizing communist countries, there's rarely like an acceptance that a lot of these countries are acting under duress, right? Like, if you're Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, you're operating under duress, like serious duress, right? If you're Venezuela, you're operating under duress, like no doubt. And to pretend like that's not true, like there aren't these external factors, is strange to me, but you are correct, like, and I'm interested in hearing more about yourself, because your position at being a Chilean is it's what a time to be in Chile right now, man. Like, what an exciting time, one way or the other. Didn't Chairman Mao lay out a road towards communism through the DOTP? Wasn't the Cultural Revolution all about that? Very interesting, the Deng Hao Gufang clique denounced that. Yeah, I mean, there's obvious disagreements. Like, big surprise, there's disagreements amongst leftists, right? Like leftists fight even at the highest levels, right? And they disagree. And I think the thing that I think is important is that we understand that, like, when Deng and that group, you keep calling it a clique, but when they take power, they're not taking power because they went in with machetes or something. They're not taking power because they're performing a coup, right? They're taking power because most people agreed that was the way to move forward, right? Like, that's the hard truth that lots of communists, socialist types don't like to ever admit. Like the divide between Stalin and Trotsky. Trotskyists hate it when I say this, and they'll call me a Stalinist and they'll say all this kind of stuff. But the truth is that Stalin takes power because most people wanted him to. Like, that's the hard truth. That Stalin didn't take a gun and start shooting Trotskyists or start like doing that kind of stuff. He didn't perform a legislative coup or something. He took power because most people wanted him to. And I think that's true of Deng and those guys too. Is that they took a look at what Mao was saying and they went, no, we disagree. And most people went Deng's way. And that's just the truth. And to me, it makes total sense. And this is the other part. Like, I don't demonize anybody in these conversations. I'm not sitting here like I don't hate Trotsky. I don't hate Stalin. Like, all these guys, like, they're just fucking people trying their best with the ideas that they have on hand. And moreover, it makes complete and total fucking sense that Mao would have a kind of a purist view of the journey towards communism, because he fucking was literally fighting a war. Like, literally fighting a war, right? Like, he wasn't like sitting back and observing an economy and like doing. Well, I mean, he was doing that. I don't want to take it away from Mao, but like, he was shooting people. Like, there was a war going on that he was legitimately fighting, and so it makes sense that he would have that kind of perspective and that kind of view. And I just think Deng and that group had a different perspective and a different idea. and that idea was obviously more popular, because if it wasn't, Deng wouldn't be the leader, right? Like, people fucking hate it when I talk this way, but it's absolutely true. It's absolutely the case that if the citizens of China did not want Deng to be their leader, he wouldn't be. Drakowski, bruh, for real, I can imagine as crippled Stephen Hawking going to Epstein's Island, and it's actually hilarious. I mean, yeah, right? Like, what the fuck? Why even go? Mark, from Negation, I'm really enjoying this conversation with you, Negation. Marxism isn't a set of dogmas. Yeah, of course, yeah. However, it has an essence. Lenin lays it out in his three sources and the three components of Marxism. Revising these components is revisionism. Yeah, but again, like, Lenin's not God, right? You don't need to completely say that, oh well, Lenin said it. So, and like the Chinese, you can see it. Like the Chinese were commenting on what the Soviets were doing, right? Like I think it is Deng again, where Deng said of Stalin that Stalin did about 70% correct, 30% wrong. And so the Chinese are not going to move forward just being like, Lenin said this, therefore. Like, they're reading his material and they're taking what they like, and you can see that expressed in the modern under Xi Jinping, right? The Chinese have been very clever in the way that they talk about communism and all this, is that they don't do this thing where they say this is the path to communism, right? They've been very careful to try to keep fundamentalism out of the conversation. That they know that fundamentalism is corrosive. They know that it can dismantle things, and moreover, they know it can cause strife with other nations. So what they're doing is they're saying, this is socialism with Chinese characteristics. We know that other nations are going to have to move forward in alternative ways with alternative methods because their situation is different. They have different resources. They're in a different position. That they have a different culture. And so they're going to have to move forward on socialist and Marxist principles towards communism in a different way. And they know that. And so when you say to me that, like, Lenin lays this out in the three sources, the three components of Marxism, well, the Chinese go, well, that's great. That's nice. Let's read that. Interesting points. Great. But it's not like they read the book of Matthew and said, oh, Jesus Christ is coming, right? Like, they don't have that view. Nor do I think they should about a system that is just being explored and experimented with and tried, right? Like the Soviet Union is like Lenin is literally one of the very first authors of let's actually do this, right? Like Lenin's one of the first. And so to pretend as though he's the last is I think a mistake. I think it's a mistake to view it that way. How corrupt those huge medias are. Twitter before refused to move CP. I don't know if I understand your comment, Tito. Sorry, bud. Look at it's still pretty fucked up how Facebook deemed the original stream safe and allowed it to circulate and go viral. Like anything for clicks. Yep. That means more. It's going to happen more. That's the thing. It's going to happen more. And that by itself is just complete absurdism. A complete absurdism. Like people are going to shoot themselves live on stream, and it's gonna go viral. People are gonna see it. Kids are gonna see it. We know it's true. And so people are reacting to it the only way that they can. Mind-blowing. Radio, during the Great Depression, the Soviets were building up their electrical system. Yeah, absolutely. Leon, I study law here in Chile. One of my most beloved teachers, Maria Figueroa, I'm definitely mispronouncing that, I apologize, who is like an eminence here, actually taught a whole class about how communism in the Western world is seen as devilized. Yeah, for sure, that's true. When actually, as an ideal, people didn't interpret well what Marx wanted, man. Well, and I think also, Leon, it's important to say that, like, Marx didn't really lay out a path, you know? That Marx's work is a critique of capitalism. That's what's important to understand. That Marx didn't really say, and then we need to do this and that and the other thing. That he had a very idealistic, visionary, like, and the workers will own the means of production. Like, that's a very big thing to say. Well, how do you do that? Well, Marx doesn't tell us, right? that what he has done is right, an extremely excellent, and it is an excellent critique of capitalism, right? But when it comes to actually doing it and actually making it happen, well, off you go, and people are trying. God bless them, they're trying, right? And failing, and trying again, and then being blown up by the CIA, and then rebuilding, trying again, having a coup happen, right? Trying again. Content, a lot of people forgot that even capitalism during the time of the aristocracies had their starts and stops, yet their failures and successes, yet each stage of history comes along ugly. Well, and I mean, capitalism by its very definition is ugly. Like, it essentially is birthed through slave trade. Like, if it wasn't for the black slave trade, I don't think capitalism gets off. Like, that is the engine that spurred capitalism forward, was the clear cutting of the nation, the building of a naval fleet through the clear cutting of resources, and then the slave trade, right? If it's not for the slave trade, like, how does capitalism build anything? How does it get anywhere? How does it do anything, right? And that's essentially how it works, right? Leon, yeah, it's definitely an interesting time to live here. Dude, I expect so. Just culturally, just what a wild time. There's huge social political change, absolutely. If you ever want to talk about how this started or how it's impacting South America, I'm happy to have a chat, man. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be very exciting. The thing that I'm most excited about, Leon, about what's happening is the idea that there might be a federated body that arises. Like, I've seen glimmerings of it, nothing huge, but glimmerings of it coming out of places like Chile. Places like Bolivia, Venezuela to a degree, and now what with Lula coming into power in Brazil, the idea that there could be something of a federated system that comes in to organize along socialist ideas that federates South America, I think that's a very exciting thing that is currently on the table, unless the CIA gets involved, as they do, right? You know all about that. Drukovsky, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't communism supposed to be an alternative to the Tsarist government in China in the 1800s? Yeah, I mean, that's who they overthrew, right? Like, that certainly the communist system under the Soviets was better than what the Tsarists were doing, right? That's another thing that often gets lost, is that like, they were improving upon, like, they didn't have a system of constitutional democracy, right? They didn't have that. They were literally overthrowing monarchs. So people seem to think that's not real, but Leon, seeing as how my country was under a dictatorship for 20 years, no shit, eh? For the first time, the Chilean people understood that change needed to be done, yeah? The concertation government, which are the president after Pinochet, tried to implant Keynesian economy, but populism ruined it. Yeah, I mean, it'd be really tough to recover from Pinochet. Like, that's the truth. Like, what happened under Pinochet was, like, it's shocking to me that people still listen to Milton Friedman and take him seriously after what happened under Pinochet. Like, that it's really, really shocking to me that Friedman is not seen as kind of a Goebbels type figure, you know, as kind of on that sort of a level. Like, Pinochet was that's a very dark moment. And for Westerners to go into Chile and do what they did with the help of Pinochet. And so from there, like, yeah, like post Pinochet, they're like, oops, like that definitely was a fuck up, right? So they tried to implant some kind of Keynesian economics, yeah, but like, sorry, dude, you let the Nazis loose. Like, you let the populists, if you like to call them that, but like, you let the far right lunatics loose. Like, you can't just put, like, but you opened up the box. You opened up the Pandora's box. You can't just put them back in, right? The psychopaths and the lunatics got the taste of blood, and they want that blood to continue, right? As simple as that, right? Simple as that. Now the center left is ruling Chile. Young, smart guys, but who lack experience, utopian, but changes. Chile lacks technocratic personality. Too much politicians, little change. Yeah, there'll be starts and stops and all that kind of stuff for sure, dude. For sure. I think what's happening in Chile is definitely important culturally. It's a big cultural moment. No, and I don't think that can be denied. But you're right. Like, they really do need to get some, like, straight up economist guys in there who are not neoliberal economists, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. I'm really rooting for Chile. I'm really rooting for Chile, just to be able to finally get fucking away from the sort of Pinochet era, like, and finally be able to plant that flag and make that statement. I said it before, right? That neoliberalism started in Chile, it will die in Chile. It's a very powerful statement. It's a very powerful statement and a beautiful sentiment. Beautiful sentiment. So I'm really rooting for Chile. Negation. If capitalist restoration in China was not a coup, then why did they jail and murder the Gang of Four, including Mao's wife, Zhang Xin? So now we're getting into stuff that I don't really have a good answer for you, bud. But I will promise you that I'll look into it a little bit more and try to find a better answer for you. That, like, I'm not an expert on everything. I try to keep things more economic. And why did they jail and murder the Gang of Four, including Mao's wife, Zhang Xing? I wouldn't be too surprised, honestly, and I'm just sort of getting into my data banks about this. Like, it's the same shit about, like, what goes on between Stalin and Trotsky, right? That Trotsky thinks that Stalin's going the wrong direction, and he and his group start to do bullshit against Stalin, and the whole thing blows off, and they blow up and go away, and Stalin's not going to do nothing, right? Like, so it seems to me like a similar sort of story, right? And it seems to be fairly common in the communist narrative that, and isn't this true of leftists generally? That, oh, you think this, therefore you're not a real leftist. Oh, you think this, so you're betraying the revolution. You think this, therefore, right? And I mean, it's probably the same story, right? That, oh, Deng came in and they're going to let the capitalists in, and so communism's over. It's a big betrayal. We got to do something about it. And that Deng and that group's not going to let it happen. Like, seems to be the way of it. And, like, it's a problem that needs to be solved in communists and communist systems and the culture of communism. That, how do we make it so that when these moments happen, where there's a disagreement point, where two groups come together and disagree, and one group wins and the other group loses, right? As these things happen, well, how do we move on with that while still keeping these people, the losers of that confrontation, how do we keep them in the fold, and how do we keep them part of the project? How do we keep them part of the project? That's a problem that communism and communists have not yet solved, and is one that I hope gets solved, because to me, the great tragedy, well, one of the great tragedies of communism is for sure the break between Trotsky and Stalin. That the Soviet Union was weaker without Trotsky in it. For sure. Trotsky was a very intelligent man. Very, very intelligent. And while the populace moved on with Stalin, I think the loss of Trotsky was a big loss. And it's likely the same story here. That there was a confrontation, people felt things needed to happen, and the power structure was like, yeah, bro, we're not gonna just roll over and let you do that. And it probably was to the detriment of China, right? That China would probably be better off if that didn't happen. And so it's a problem that needs to be solved, and I don't have a solution. But it's something that should be addressed. I am going to look into this a little bit more, dude, because I don't want to. Right now, I'm speaking from a place of ignorance. I'm just guessing. I don't know everything about everything that ever happened, right? And I accept that, and I hope you don't think less of me for that. But I'll look into that for sure. In fact, China Gang of Four. And I'll just go put this just over here. Do some reading after the stream. Thanks, bud. negation. The problem with revisionism is that it negates Marxism's essence. If you revise something enough, is it the same thing? Has it become something completely new? It's. I mean, that's a tough one, right? Like, and is it revisionism to admit that maybe the guy that wrote this didn't have the full picture? Like, I find that saying, like, unless you're literally changing historical events, right? Like, unless you're literally saying, no, that thing that we all said happened didn't happen, right? Is it revisionism to update the theory and to update the principle? And you could even say, like, well, okay, maybe that was great for Lenin and maybe that was great for the Soviets at the time, but, like, we live in a different country with a different culture and a different thing that's happening, right? And like, why should the Chinese continue forward with what they were writing? Because the Soviet Union collapsed, right? Well, collapsed, but the Soviet Union didn't continue. The communist project stopped. So why should they take that seriously, right? Like, sure, read it. Like, there's good stuff, absolutely. You read Trotsky, you read Lenin, you read even Stalin, right? Like, that's good stuff. But, like, it petered out. It came to an end. Like, it lost the steam. So how seriously should you take it? Like, I don't think that, I think that you're making a mistake if you treat it like it's God's gospel. If you treat writers like Lenin, even Marx, if you treat these guys like they're like Jesus Christ writing with gold on a piece of paper and saying that if you do anything different, it's revisionism. Like, I just think it's a mistake. It's like a form of fundamentalism that that I think will prevent you from seeing what's really going on and try to find solutions that maybe haven't been tried before, or perhaps, according to the dogma, have been considered blasphemous, right? Like, that's essentially the accusation that people are pointing at Deng, isn't it? That he's performing a type of blasphemy. Well, proof's in the pudding, if you ask me. Proof's in the pudding. Like, it worked. Like, I hate to say it, right? I really do, because I don't like to kind of dunk on people, but, like, you can say what you like about Deng. It fucking worked. Fucking proof's in the pudding, dude. Like, go take a look at some videos, like a walk around video in China. Go take a look. You cannot tell me it didn't work. Like, it absolutely fucking worked. So, proof's in the pudding. Drakowski, what's your opinion on North Korea? I know that technically they're a communist nation, but I think their leader, from what I heard, is taking more of a dictator standpoint instead. Again, I'm going to say, like, I'm not really the big expert on North Korea. I tend to pay much more attention to China than I do to North Korea because of North Korea's position, right? Like, North Korea's, like, people will come in here from some, like, it happened yesterday. A guy was in here being like, in Estonia, this happened. Like, Estonia is a population of 1 million people, dude. Like, I don't fucking pay attention to Estonia, you know? Like, I don't base my opinions about the capitalist or the communist project or geopolitics based on what fucking happens in Estonia. Like, sorry. It's the truth. And I have kind of a similar thing on North Korea. Like, I'm rooting for them. I hope they do well. But, you know, what happens in North Korea isn't, like, defining. And I think the difference between how I view North Korea and how typical Westerners view North Korea is that I respect North Korea. I respect their narrative. I respect that we destroyed them. Like, they got destroyed. Like, rubble. Down, like, all their infrastructure down to zero. Like, total devastation. We destroyed them. And the fact that they are where they are now is a fucking miracle. Like, it really is. Like, they went from literally, like, gravel to having anything in a very short period of time. And that's really great. And I really should do more reading about North Korea, especially the Juche philosophy. Some of my regular watchers are really fans of this, and so I should do better in that regard. But we're all trying our best, goddammit. I work a full-time job, so the I don't know that I would describe. I can't wade into this. All I do know, all I feel really safe about saying about North Korea is that I hope that they and South Korea can find a way to reunify. I hope that they can cross that bridge successfully. I hope that they can reunite with one another. I'm really rooting for that for them. And and I think they both want that for each other. I think that the South Koreans and the North Koreans are interested in a reunification project. They just don't know how to do it. That there's been a lot of shit that's gone on, and they have ideological differences. I will say this, is that when it comes to North Korea, never believe anything the West says about it, because like the degree that the West is willing to tell lies about other nations, it seems like in North Korea there's no depth, there's no bottom to the stupid shit that Westerners are willing to say about North Korea. That like I've literally seen Westerners claim that the new North Korean like sacred animal is a unicorn, and that they worship unicorns, right? That kind of shit. And it's just like, it's just trash. And it's part of the reason why I don't know as much about North Korea, is that it's very difficult to find good information about North Korea, right? It's just a lot of trash that comes our way from that. Ronnie McNutt, the public crucifixions are beginning. I mean, I wouldn't describe what happened to Ronnie as a crucifixion, but it definitely is like a public event. Like it's a public spectacle without a doubt. It has that kind of equality with it, radio, for sure. Negation says, like, Lenin isn't a god, I'm not stating it. Yeah, however, I take, just as Mao and the other CCP did, his words very highly. Yes, absolutely. He, just as Mao, combated revisionism in the party. I'm not going to disagree with that, dude. Yeah. I mean, I respect these guys too, but it's yeah. Proofs in the pudding. Ligue des Z, the Gang of Four were a major corrupting force, and they were dealt with rightfully. Yeah, Ligue des Z. When it comes to China history and China politics, I generally defer to you, my friend. Drakowski, do you think there will be a big shift to communism if a war between BRICS and NATO's breaks out? Like, what do you think will happen? I generally think that the West is going to go through a period of balkanization first. That I think that balkanization period has already begun, and it will only be after that kind of dramatic, like, there will be people such as myself who come out in favor of communism, but the momentum of the nation is towards balkanization. And what that means is that, like, the United States and NATO and these organizations are going to break apart and become more erratic and more difficult to perceive. And that they'll be it will begin with an individual state. That's what I perceive. That it won't be that suddenly all the people of America will come up and there'll be this big surge of communism that comes. That's not how it's going to go. That as the project of abandonment continues, and it is a project of abandonment, right? Like that the system of neoliberalism is extracting all of the wealth and productivity that it can out of the people, and then once it can no longer do that, it abandons them. It's not that it will abandon them, it does abandon them. It's just how it works. And once that abandonment gets bad enough, and all of the wealth and all of the extraction is being pulled out of the society and being funneled into war, which is the last profitable thing for the capitalists to fund. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that eventually people are going to look at their pay stub and be like, hey, I'm losing like 30% of my money to an institution that gives me fucking nothing for this, right? And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that eventually people are just going to be like, why are we paying that? I'm no longer going to pay that. And when they do it, they're going to evoke no taxation without representation. They're going to do the Tea Party. They're going to do all that. They're going to evoke that kind of legacy and that kind of lineage throughout America. Because the truth is that the federal government has abandoned the people of America. Like, it's not interested in helping anybody. It's not interested in that. It's interested in extracting as much wealth as it can and exploiting the citizens for the personal gain of people who go rape little girls. That's the structure of the American system. and the Western system generally, and it's going to collapse. And it's going to be a state like California or Texas, right, to secede first. Secession's already on the ballot. Something like 30 to 40% of most states' citizens, including Democrats, are talking about secession, right? Things like Brexit did happen, and as things get more desperate, and as the abandonment becomes more and more palatable, and as the federal government gets more and more intrusive, and creates more and more problems for states that are actually trying to solve their problems, eventually people are going to be like, why do we pay any fealty whatsoever to this? Why do we pay any attention to the federal government? It's nothing but a fucking pain in our ass. And and that's what's going to happen first, because that's where the momentum is. That's where the society has gotten to. That communism is just a little tiny baby seed right now. It's just a little tiny, itsy bitsy little baby seed. And there's a giant monster, two giant monsters actually, the FBI and the CIA, that go around and explicitly try to destroy it. So that's another problem, right? So the balkanization of the United States and Canada, and probably NATO, the European nations, I find to be something of an inevitability. And the thing that'll really punctuate that is when the European nations and the states start fighting amongst themselves again. That's something of an inevitability as well. That we want to hope and believe that we're going to go on a trajectory of like, oh, things are bad right now, but we're going to do communism and then it'll all even out. No. The United States and the West in general has a long history of fighting amongst each other. World War I, World War II, the Civil War, right? Like, it's going to happen. The European nations are going to have a war amongst each other, again, for sure. And the Americans will have a war amongst themselves, again, for sure. Like, that's an inevitability. It's in my view, it's unavoidable. It can't not happen. And perhaps after that, the communists will be able to get heard. But what comes with those periods of war is, of course, communist purges. Like, that's for sure coming. Like, we're already seeing that to a certain degree. Like, there are world events right now that if you even talk about, you're purged, right? You're cut out. There was a huge purge of RT television that happened on YouTube and all of that, right? So there will be a moment when people like me are chased off these social media platforms, and the only people whose voices will be heard will be the literal fascists. Like, that shit has already started. And so don't bullshit yourself. Don't bullshit yourself. We are heading towards a period of internal war. The European nations will go to war with one another. America will go to war with itself. And the whole thing will break apart. It's nothing new. It's done it before. It'll do it again. Leon, those choose regular people to write it so it could be more representative, but it ended lacking seriousness and experts. There were no economists, no jurists, no politicians. So the ideas were good. But they didn't work for a politic constitution. Yeah, I feel you here. This happens a lot. This happened in South Africa. That in South Africa when come on, John. When the black population took power, they took power with a lot of really good energy and good ideas and good thoughts and good philosophy, but that's not actually how you run a government, right? You run a government through legislation, through lawyers, through economists, right? Through the nuts and bolts of how to actually do it. And on that front, they actually lost, right? They ceded a lot of power to the economic side of it. And so it kind of maintained a lot of the old segregationists and all that throughout South Africa. And it's completely possible that would happen in Chile too. That's totally possible. That that a bunch of well-meaning people who are big on philosophy and big on ideas don't really know the nuts and bolts of how to do it, right? I think that, and you saying that that's what's happening isn't a surprise. I've seen that happen before. It can definitely go down that way. Yeah, we are in a kind of Schumpeter's economic crash right now, news cycle, inflation as a consequence of the neoliberal state. As for now, leftist government, neoliberal economy and state. Yeah, Chile relies on mono export, basically copper. Good export, though. Copper's a good export. So we kind of need to have a free commerce and laissez-faire. Would be trashing to have protectionism, as it happened with Ibanez del Campo in the 1930s after the crash. Yeah, it's you guys are going to go through some shit. Like, it's going to be up and down and all around. And the CIA is going to get involved. The United States is going to get involved at some point. And so it's still exciting, dude. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I would rather live in a nation that was trying to solve the problems of the nation and failing than live in a nation that was not trying to solve the problems and succeeding. Fishing W. Grumpy, could you please accept me on TikTok? I want a good debate. No, thank you. Appreciate that. I love communism. That's great to hear, bud. Fishing W. Grumpy, I appreciate that, bud. Not for free. I'll put it that way. Not for free, bud. All this talk about other countries is just a fig leaf discussion about how the West should do their revolution. Yep. And we fanatically seek any excuse not to do the work like these other countries did. Yeah. I think that's right, bud. Well, and I think a lot of these other countries, they're drawn to revolution. That revolution, it's not that they pushed towards revolution, it's that the country required it. That to continue living, they needed to do it, and it had to happen. That things got so bad for them, and the spirit of revolution took such a hold that it was famously, Lenin wasn't even in town. Lenin literally writes, maybe the revolution will happen in my lifetime, and then weeks later it happens. You know, so even someone like Lenin didn't see it happening, didn't see it coming, and then there it was right in front of him. Right, so it is kind of inscrutable. There's a truth, and maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? It could fucking happen. Who knows? Maybe all of a sudden, all of these QAnon people will be full blown communists, and they'll just overthrow the whole fucking thing, and we'll be ruled by QAnoners. Huh? Aren't you looking forward to it? Huh? Yeah, and I think that this is the truth, Content. We hope that we can just vote socialism while preserving that feeling of freedom we hold in our heads in our West. So the idea of oppressing the owner class is just unspeakable. Yeah. We haven't gotten to the point yet as a people where we are fully embracing and acknowledging that electoral politics has failed. That's the real truth. That we're still holding on to that shred of hope that we can vote our way out of it. And it's just not going to go down that way. It's that the political systems have been purchased by neoliberal capital, by capitalists, by owners, that the politicians are bought, and it's not going to change. It's not going to get and that they have a strategy, right? Here in Canada, in the United States, it's very explicit. It's literally on the one side, it's neo-Nazi level fascists. Right? And then on the other side, it's essentially hard-right neoliberal capitalists pointing at the fascists going, you don't want them to lead you, do you? And that's it. That's the whole fucking strategy in the United States. So you lose no matter what you do because capital wins. And in Canada, it's a little bit more nuanced because of the NDP, that we have a far-right party called the Conservatives, and their goal is to gut the entire infrastructure, and they're very upfront about it. The problem is government, that they want to privatize everything, right? Sell it off to the neoliberal capitalists. The liberals exist more and more. They just look like conservatives, they're supposed to be liberals, but they're not. They're conservatives, but their strategy is to just basically keep things as they are, right? So the capitalists are in charge, and so they're liberal, and they just keep things as they are. And then the NDP exists to just give a little pressure valve. So they'll raise tax by 2%. So there'll be like a 4-year period where taxes are up 2% or whatever, right? Nothing serious really happens, and wealth is just kept in the hands of the capitalist class. So electoral politics has failed, and the population doesn't want to admit it. That it wants to believe that the electoral system can solve this problem, and it can't. And so revolution is all we have left. Prodigal Seagull, have you gone down the rabbit hole and everything leading up to JFK's death? I've spent a lot of time on JFK. I don't know if it's very relevant. Like, even if the CIA assassinates him, like, it doesn't really change my opinion on the CIA. Like, the CIA is the largest terrorist organization in the world. Like, okay, they killed JFK. Great. You know? Like, I've already made my mind up. JFK is not that important to me. Like, I think JFK really mattered for the people who went through it. And that's why I think there's still this kind of clinging on to. But, like, the thing that you'll find if you hang out with me for any period of time, you'll find that my favorite thing to do when someone's challenging a position or trying to convince me of something is I just cede it. I'll just be like, yeah, okay, I accept your position. And then I say, so what? And that's basically how I feel about the JFK assassination. Like, okay, so the CIA assassinated JFK. So? What's it change? Nothing. Like, I still think the CIA is the largest terrorist organization on the planet by a lot. I still think the United States government is completely corrupted. I still think the electoral system is a complete failure. The system doesn't work on behalf of the society. And so, yeah, they assassinated JFK. Okay. Like, my opinion doesn't change. So what that means then is that the JFK conspiracy just becomes kind of a novelty for me. That it's not actually for a purpose. It doesn't serve anything. I don't win any battles. I don't win any fights. I don't change any minds. I don't convince anybody. Right? It just ends up being kind of intellectual masturbation. It's interesting, sure, in the way that, like, aliens are interesting. But is it helpful? Is it actually useful? Like, we literally have, like, The Intercept reporting on the CIA going around shooting kids in Afghanistan. Openly, in the streets. Like, I don't think I'd give a shit. Content says, so we hope to convince ourselves that we have a good reason to not build socialism because we can't cope what is necessary to do. Yeah. I think you're nailing it, dude. Have you watched any of George Carlin's shows? If not, you should. Yeah, I've watched all of Carlin's stuff. I watched Carlin when he was doing Carlin. Right? And I believed him then. I'm not one of these guys, like, I'm not a person who's looking back on Carlin. Like, I experienced Carlin as he was happening. And he was telling the truth then. Still telling the truth. I think it's great that Carlin has come back around. I think that's great. I think it's really good that Gen Z and the younger generation has found George Carlin and is resurrecting him. And George Carlin is back. I think Carlin himself would hate it. One of the last things that George Carlin said was, I don't care what happens to you fucking lot, and if you do figure out how to make it through this, keep me out of it. Very Carlin-esque. But yeah, I love George Carlin, and I'm glad to see that he's around and alive and kicking. Drakovsky, I don't know if you're allowed to play songs on stream, but if you can, please play The Sacred War. It's a beautiful song with a great fight against the fascists. Ask me again at a different time, dude. My internet is shit. My internet is just trash. So I don't want to play videos and stuff right now because I'm really, really worried that it'll just bog my internet down. And that's the reason why I'm not jumping around and showing stuff. I usually show articles and stuff. You can see I've got tabs up here. But anytime I click on any of this, it's like, blah. And I already, the stream went down once already today, so I don't need to try to blah, 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 blah. What are my thoughts on Bernie? I mean, Bernie's a democratic socialist. I think that he's the natural sort of response from an electoral system. The fact that Hillary and Biden both stole the election from him internally shows you everything you need to know. The electoral system will never allow someone like Bernie Sanders in power. And the wealthy explicitly said that if Bernie does come into power, they'll vote for Trump. So, like, Bernie Sanders will never be the nominee. That now, I think the next guy they're looking at is Buttigieg. I think is the next guy. And no, Like, I think that they are fine with Bernie being there. But at the end of the day, Bernie Sanders, very much like AOC and the Squad and all that, that's just their brand, right? That's just their brand. It's how they're, it's they are the Hulk Hogan in the conversation. And Hulk Hogan needs to tell the truth and be honest and be honorable and be this kind of stuff, right? But it's just their brand. That's all. Loke, good to see you, bud. This stream is the Dunning-Kruger effect on 10 times star. Communism has failed in history every time, except the times that it didn't. Like, dude, I'm going to be really straight with you. If you're saying that, then you are illiterate. Like, period. Like, you don't know anything about communism, if that's what you're saying. Straight up. Yeah. You're literally demonstrating the Dunning-Kruger effect. You just indicated that you know nothing about Marx, Lenin, foreign countries in general. Yeah. Or history, or what's going on in the world, really. Like, frankly. Rob Red, I don't think Canada will ever be communist. I mean, yeah. Certainly, like, if it happens in my lifetime, I'll be floored. Absolutely. Like, it may begin happening at the end of my life. Like, that's what I expect. It may begin happening at the end of my life. But I'm not sitting here being like, we're going to be communist tomorrow. Like, that's bullshit. A.B. Paid, North Korea was never socialist. Kim Jong-il denounced class struggle, created Juche. Yes. He also purged pro-Soviet, pro-Chinese communists from the WPK. Sounds to me like you might know more about the situation than I do, bud. Like, I'll be very upfront with you. I don't know that much about North Korea. Like, I said it before. Like, I don't really pay that much attention to, like, the smaller states. Like, to me, what happens in China matters a lot more than what happens in North Korea. And that what North Korea is going through is its own sort of thing. And it seems like there's definitely, like, a cult of personality that has built up under the Il family, Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-il, all those guys, for sure. Like, I think that's a bit undeniable, and they definitely have like a nepotism thing going on. Like, it's all in the family, right? Like, there's that. So it's different than what's going on elsewhere, for sure. But I don't really want to condemn anything because I don't really know that much about it. And my position is that if I don't know anything about it, then I'm not gonna condemn it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not like someone like Loke. I'm not gonna condemn something just because the CIA told me to. Oddity said already begun. Who is balkanized already? Is that what I said? I didn't mean that. Like, I do think like the process has begun though. Like, it's. I mean, you take a look at Brexit. Like, that's a form of balkanization, right? That it's the United States. It's going to happen. They're going to do it. I don't know how they stop it. You know, like, it would require like a major pivot. Something really extreme would have to happen to prevent the United States from going into a balkanization period. You can't keep countries like this together without some kind of genuine unifying project. You just can't. And moreover, like the leaders of during the colonial period, the leaders knew this, right? John A. Macdonald said outright that, like, we got to build the rail. The rail is what's going to unify Canada, and that's a unifying project, right? That's why transit systems are so important. Something like the Belt and Road Initiative is so important because it unifies. It's a unifying project, right? And we're doing the opposite. We're doing the opposite. We're not interested in a unifying project. We're interested in in an abandonment project. That's the project that we're actually doing, right? Do I think the West will collapse? Yeah. Like, yeah. You can't abandon your citizens this way. Like, you just can't, and expect the society and expect the civilization to stay intact. You just can't, right? Like, and history has been like this over and 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 over again, right? The fall of the Roman Empire, the collapse of, like, the Ming Dynasty and the Qing Dynasty in China, the collapse of the dynasties throughout India. Like, it's the same story over and over and over again. That that an empire spreads or is erected or some kind of large nation state is put into place. There are unifying projects. There are projects to capture the idea of the nation, right? And then the next generation comes along and there's less unification. The new generation doesn't really see themselves as part of that older generation that had those spirit of unification. And then the next generation after that is literally like, it's every man for themselves. Like, we're not getting anything from this government. By then, the government is usually, or the ruling structure anyway, is interested in itself and isn't interested in responding to the needs of the populace. And so the whole thing starts to fall apart. Like, it's common. Like, it is. It's just common. It's way more common for nations and countries and things like that to disintegrate than it is for them to stay together forever. Like, this idea that a country the size of America, that's literally only 150 years old, that just like came together through a colonial period of slavery and genocide, is just going to stay that way. Like, probably not. Like, if history is any guidepost for us, especially as the system that's in place in order to keep it all together, which is the federal government, abandons it. Like, what's the federal government doing? Seriously. It's not a rhetorical question. What's the federal government doing? Is it building a unifying project? Or is it extracting wealth and abandoning people? You can't keep a country together that way. You just can't. Yeah, and Cotton's laying some truth here. So because it happened in the DPRK, the government in the DPRK should be overthrown. I don't think that's what AB was saying, but I mean, this is a worthwhile point to bring up for sure. Yeah, the government in DPRK should be overthrown by who? The West? The moment the Yanks try to fuck around, the DPRK will push the button and the West will deserve it. I love the DPRK. I'm tired of the pearl clutchers demanding I denounce my appreciation and respect for other countries. F liberalism. Burn in a clean burning fire. A clean burning fire. Very good content. Yeah, I mean, I agree with the spirit that you're putting out there, content. Like, what's happening in North Korea is the concern of the North Koreans. And it seems to me like if they want to live in a different structure or a different society, it's not really up to us, right? Yeah, you liberals will tolerate Nazis. Yeah, we can like whatever we want. That's the hard truth, isn't it, Cotton? I love it when liberals come up and try to critique other societies or other structures while literally being like, yeah, but the Nazis are fine. That's totally cool. Great question, Rob Red. First, grinning. I'm sure you already covered it. Just want to say President Biden is a real POS. Every rail worker should wildcat tomorrow. For sure, dude. I'm right there with you, man. Right there with you. Like, literally trying to just force the rail workers back to work. No strike. Like, get fucked. Rob Red, I like this question. What are your thoughts on Middle Eastern countries that are run by religious extremists? So, really, you're talking about Iran, right? Like, that's really where you're talking about. And if it's not specifically Iran, can you name the country that you really want to talk about? Because every country's different. They've all got their own shit going on, right? And the history of what's going on matters a lot. So what's going on in Iran is really interesting, right? Like, when... before the United States invaded Iraq, Iran was actually fairly secular, right? Like, they were not run by religious extremists. They were I mean, Iran had experienced a coup. That's the Shah, right? Literally the only war Iran has ever engaged in, the only war of aggression that Iran has ever engaged in was under the Shah. In the last 200 years, was under the Shah when the Shah was overthrown. Right? Or when Iran was overthrown and they installed the Shah. But after the Shah leaves, right, there's a period of secularism that happens in Iran. But when the invasion of Iraq happened, the Iranians were like, all hands on deck. Big fucking red alert, right? Like, not only was Iraq invaded, so was Afghanistan. And if you look at a map, where's Iraq? Where's Afghanistan? What's in the fucking middle? right? And it's not like the Americans were being secret. It's not like the Americans were like whispering to one another about what their intentions were. They were openly calling for an invasion of Iran. And so Iran finds itself in a position where it's surrounded by Westerners with the intent of coming in and fucking them up. And so Iran is like, okay, we need to put into places of power people who are militant, and people who are interested in the culture of Iran. Well, that's theocrats. That's your far-right theocrats. Whether you like it or not. Those are the people who are the most militant, the most willing to shoot, and the most willing to protect the culture of Iran. And so, for a period, the Iranians were begrudgingly accepting the rule of the far-right theocrats in their society. When the Americans left Afghanistan, when the Americans leave Afghanistan, and they're not really involved in Iraq anymore, right? Like Iraq has become like a broken up series of vassal states, really. Like Iraq will never be a unified country again. Like that's not going to happen. And so because the West has turned its eye on China and on what's called the Pacific pivot, the Iranians, I think, feel like the pressure is off, the heat is off, and they want to return to being a secular society again. And so they're turning to their leadership and saying to the theocrats that run the place, we don't want you anymore. And the theocrats aren't just going to give up power. And so you see what you're seeing. You've got big protest movements. The CIA wants to be involved, color revolution, all that kind of stuff. But I think it is genuine. I think the people of Iran are like, okay, it's over. Let's go. We want to no longer be in this theocratic system anymore. We want like a cultural liberation is what is really what they're going through. A liberalization of their culture, which, you know, I'm rooting for them. I hope the CIA doesn't fucking get in power and overthrow them and fuck them up. Wasn't Iraq socialist before the USA invasion? No. That Iraq, Saddam Hussein was essentially a puppet of the United States, essentially a vassal, right? That the United States puts Saddam Hussein in power in order to just suck the oil out of the region, and that Saddam Hussein was willing to play that game initially. And then Saddam Hussein starts to do things on his own, such as the invasion of Kuwait, which leads to Desert Storm under Bush Sr. They push Saddam back into his place, but they don't invade Iraq because that would, according to Dick Cheney, cause a quagmire. And then Bush Jr., after 9/11, decides to use that as an opportunity to go in and get rid of Saddam. And the reason why I think they were actually interested in getting rid of Saddam is that Saddam was starting to move away from the dollar, starting to trade oil in euros, and that undercuts the dollar hegemony and the unipolar power of the dollar that exists in the world at the time. And the United States wasn't going to tolerate that. And I think that's the real reason why they went in there to overthrow Saddam Hussein, because they saw that as a legitimate threat, that if countries realized that they could trade in something other than dollars, or if they felt that they could trade in something other than dollars, that would create a lot of problems for the United States. That's why what's happening in the world today is such a huge threat to the United States. That the BRICS network and all this, if nations can start trading oil in something other than dollars, like the United States is going to experience an economic collapse that's going to make the Great Depression look like baby's first depression. And it's going to be very serious. And moreover, I think most of the Western nations know it's going to happen. Right? Most of the Western nations know it's going to go down that way. Iran deserves our critical support. Yeah, if you're a piece of shit libs, then they deserve unconditional support. Before the U.S. installed Saddam, yeah, I mean, like there was a period of social, of course, like most of these Middle Eastern countries have some history of like communism or socialism or something like that. But it's so difficult because of what's gone on in the modern era, right? That like the invasions throughout, and I mean, even the Soviets were getting involved in the '80s, right? Like it's the Middle East is never allowed to develop, you know, like and the West's idea is to destroy the place so that China and Russia can never develop it. Simple as that. That Biden picture makes me want to get back into silk screening. Yeah. So I don't have the patience for silk screening. The U.S. overthrew Mossadegh, a secular government, in 1954. At the same time, they were overthrowing Arbenz, yeah, in Guatemala. Yep. Sounds right. Prodigal Seagull. Is it just me, or are images of people uprising and protesting in places like Iran and Chile really inspiring and powerful? Yeah. I agree with that, man. I agree with that. Rob Red. Thoughts on Muammar Gaddafi? I mean, think what you like. He came to power in a bloodless coup, which meant that he basically walked up to the ruling monarch and said, "You're out." And he went, "Yep, that's right." He obviously had popular support. And his policies created the strongest economy on the continent, on the African continent. Like, and he famously said, "I will not give my own father a house until every Libyan is housed." And so he obviously had the idea of socialism and the idea of those ideas in mind when he was moving forward. And I mean, the strength of the economy that he built. He was super based in a lot of the shit that he said. He was like literally supporting like the Irish rebels, like that sort of stuff. And I just think that the Americans killed him and destroyed his country for the same reason they invaded Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia, to staunch the spread of socialism and communism, right? Like it's like what's so fucked up about this conversation, about the conversation about communism always fails, like the kind of dead brains that come in here and say that shit. It's like the Americans have always been very upfront about what they're doing in the world. Like they've always been extremely upfront that they're going to go in there and kill some communists and destroy it, stop the staunch of communism. And they'll say this, and it's like, well, if communism fails, if that's what communism does, if communism naturally fails, then why are we spending hundreds of billions of dollars to overthrow governments? Like, just let it fail then. It just naturally fails, right? So why aren't you just letting it fail? The real fear that American capital has is that they know communism is a superior system. They know it works better. They know that the people will want it more. And so they've got to do everything they can to prevent any real examples from existing in the world. But the truth is that communist nations can build faster than Americans can bomb. That's why communism will win, ultimately. Yeah, trade in USD gets US Navy protection as well as London insurance coverage. US dollar trade smooths out difficulties like acts of God and piracy. Yeah, moves away from dollars will have to address this. Yeah, that's true. But really, what trade in the US dollar gives America more than anything is that it gives them wealth and power without doing anything. So if Venezuela trades with, I don't know, France, right, America gets a cut. And that's going to end. Like, so America's going to stop getting wealth for nothing. Gaddafi wrote a book, Green Book of Communism, I think. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that. I haven't taken the opportunity to read. Because honestly, like, I have never felt the need to be, like, bro down with Gaddafi. Like, I've never felt that. What the Americans did to Libya is unbelievable. It's unbelievable that anyone would even attempt to defend capitalism or NATO or American imperialism after what happened in Libya. Like, it's like literally an unprovoked attack, destroying the country and erecting a slave state. Like, that's literally what happened. Like, no Cassius Belli, no declaration, no nothing. Literally just like, we don't like this guy. I think Hillary Clinton said it best. We came, we saw, he died. Ha 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 ha. Like, fucking psycho. You know? Like, who was Gaddafi invading? At least when they, like, overthrew Saddam and went in there, they were like, well, he's a bad man. He tried to invade some people before. You know, he's a bad man. Yeah, he's a bad man. He's funded by you. Obviously, he's a bad man. What'd Gaddafi do? If someone causes the whole Atlanticist project to bomb, then out of existence, they're okay in my book. Yeah, it's just crazy. All right, guys, I'm exhausted. I'm really tired. I know this is a little bit early, but I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna call it a night. Beautiful chat today. Lots of new faces, lots of new people. I hope you guys are doing really well out in the world. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.